Good afternoon. This is Hilda Ward, and I'm so happy to have Leonard Tuchyner here. Did I say your last name right?
You actually did.
All right. I'm glad. I'm proud of myself. Well, one of the things that we're going to be talking about is that you have a book of poetry, and I love the title, A Journey to Elsewhere. And I'm wondering, where did that title come from?
It just popped into my head. But,
Really?
But there's a rationale behind it. Because the book is all about the stages and seasons of a person's life.
Right.
So we're always on a journey, and elsewhere is a place we haven't been yet. And the final elsewhere is when we pass over to.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense, because when I was trying to figure it out, I was like, okay, I see the poetry of all seasons, but Journey to Elsewhere. Now that makes a lot of sense. That's a great title. How long did it take you to write this?
Well, I didn't sit down to write a book.
Okay.
I'm a poet, and I make sure I write at least one poem a week.
Okay.
And sooner or later, I accumulated all these poems. So the idea was to put them in a book.
Right.
You know, when I found out that somebody would publish them, then it was just compiling them and finding a rationale.
Yeah. Well, I write poetry too, and it's kind of scary for me to think about, publishing it, and yet I share them all the time. But it feels kind of scary to put them in a book. So were you nervous about your book going on?
I wasn't nervous about the book. I was nervous about what do you do after you get the book published.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, this is what you do. You sit here and you get interviewed and you talk to people about your stories so that people will get to read them. Yeah. But it's been really a great experience for me to read your poetry, because I could identify with an awful lot of them. And I think you said you had a poem that you wanted to share with us. The first one?
Yeah, the first poem sets the scape for the rest of the poem.
Okay.
And since I'm legally blind, I can't read it, so I've pre-recorded it.
Great.
And I can only hope that the electronic gods will be on our side.
Okay.
If they're not, you can read it.
All right.
A gardener's seasons. In early spring the garden grows with refreshed spirit and vigor, as new like screams awakening. The gardener sinks his spade into dark, moist, rested earth. Shoots of young life leap joyously from promising fertile ground. Fountains of hope flow deep in youth. There's trust in possibilities. Summer passion brings possibilities. Tomatoes wrestle with leaves and vines, vying for every glint of sunlight, thirsting for every drop of moisture, every inch of nutritive soil, until, at last, when summer is spent, the crackled ground is dry and hard. Cadaver-sucking, ghoulish vermin ingest remnants of vitality from gasping garden vegetables. The gardener is tired. His glorious youth is spent. Fall peaks over his horizon, but with fall come reviving winds that kill sap-sucking parasites. Now it's time to plant cold season crops of kale and other brassica. The gardener must find the strength and will that came so easy when young blood was clear and hot to spread. He must nurture a final growth, one that prefers the chilling cold. Kale must vanquish remaining moths, gather sunbeams from waning sol, to prosper in that season when lush leaves of spring die and dry and bloom to new fruition. The gardener has one more chance while his back and limbs are frail to unfold his ultimate bloom that in hope will prepare him for the dark sleeping night of winter, filled with dreams of tomorrow's spring.
That's it.
That's it. Well, that you had me going through all the seasons. That's pretty wonderful. And did that just come out of you, or did it take you a while to write that?
I'm someone who has to labor at poetry.
Okay.
Occasionally, it'll come right down from wherever it comes from. But I consider that to be rare gifts. Most of the time, I get the basic ideas down, and then they're working them into being a poem is an arduous task.
Wow. See, for me, mine just flow out of me. And I feel very blessed that happens for me. Sometimes I labor, but most of the time I would speak when somebody asks me to write a poem. But when poetry comes to me, it just comes. So
How often do you write a poem?
I don't do every day like you, or every week like you. They just come wherever I happen to be. And so sometimes I can go for a long period of time, and then there are other times when they just come very often. And there was one poem that I turned to that I really wanted to share because it really got me. And so I'm going to share this one, Going with the Flow or Not. When I was a young boy, I settled by the sea and fished off a seawall which overlooked the banks of a river's channel that scoured its way through the sandy bay bottom. When tides came, they ran with a hustle and carried schools of West Coast mullet. I and my bare feet with long cane pole snagged me a daily fish harvest. When the tide ebbed, it sped like a train, 10 knots at least, its retreating wane. With the brazen foolishness of youth, I'd climb down to tooth-sharp rocks below. My dog left barking on the seawall. Launched myself into the rapid flow, thrilled by the power of the current as it bore me far out to the Gulf, my faithful dog chasing on the bank until there was no bank left at all, where he sat and waited anxiously. Now here is a thing I learned from this, one of my magnificent follies. Go with the flow, but not all the way, lest I be lost in the Gulf's abyss. I have not strength to fight the torrent, still there is enough to compromise. Swim with a gentle, unhurried grace in the direction of my choosing. Eventually fate will ease its grip. I'll find myself in gentle waters, when I might paddle to a safe shore, where my faithful dog waits evermore and can collect my catch of the day. But as years go by, I feel the tide that drags relentlessly out to sea. The channel's breath forever spreads. Each year haven't seen further away. Beyond my reach, it will be one day. My devoted dog no longer waits. Now I hear faint crash of waves on yon coastline far beyond, where my ebbing tide comes in. Do I hear a shadow bark? That one really got me. And before we were on the show, you said that your dog came to try to rescue you when you went out there.
Yeah, I was wanting to see what he would do if he thought that I was, in trouble. All I did was keep my head almost totally in the water and didn't move, and it was about 100 yards out. And this Dalmatian, and Dalmatians don't like water generally, and he didn't. He nevertheless came out to rescue me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How long did you have him?
That particular dog I got when I was about 16, and then that was in New Jersey, and then we moved to St. Petersburg, and I had him for several years then on into when I was going to college.
Oh, good. So you had him a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember your first poem?
I can remember the first poem that I wrote when I got serious about writing poems. I couldn't even guarantee I ever wrote a poem before that.
Right. Yeah.
I remember that one, and that's actually in this book.
Oh, and which one was it?
Wherever There Was Music.
Wherever There Was Music. Well, when I asked you that, I found myself thinking about my first poem was when Kennedy was killed. That was the very first poem I ever sat down and wrote. And then my father-in-law passed, and so that was in the same time. And then from that point on, from the 60s on, then the poems started pouring out of me. So I remember that vividly because John F. Kennedy's being killed was a big event in my life.
For the world.
Yes, for the world, absolutely. I remember getting a thank you card from Jackie because I wrote her a note and told her how much I was feeling for her because, I really connected with her. Wherever There Was Music.
Oh, you got it.
Isn't that something? I just happened to turn to it. How about that? All right, here we go. Wherever there was music. Your music always brings you near, my life's fulfilled in melodies that spring like fountains from your voice and songs that sing with soft blue eyes. Thus my heart is filled with your love. Your fingers caress ivory keys, and my soul remembers old worlds of warm, dark woods and courtly halls, comforted in piano themes. My beloved perched on her bench, serene passion framed in elegance. Or a fire-warmed chalet, is it? Cold winds raging. Chalet, okay. Yeah. Cold winds raging. Creaks of bending timbers sway in seasoned strains. Within rhythms mingle with laughing flames. You pour into a moonlight sonata. My heart rests in fire's blushing embers. Our spirits glide on lofting tones, each flowing note a glow of care. Every chord binds us to our core. We soar in our sound together in rapturous, searing, sacred love. Through eons you have always been here, as ages turn like pages in a book. You were with me in every chapter. I remember always by your music, where we find ourselves in dance, entwined in the endless infusion of time. That is beautiful. That is beautiful.
Thank you.
I really love it. Yeah, music is very important. And your wife plays.
She's a professional.
Yes, and that's wonderful. I wish I could have played piano, but it's wonderful when you have that talent.
Well, and she's the subject of this poem.
Yes, that's what I got that feeling. Yes, it's wonderful. And then next to it is one called Swimming with Moonflowers.
Yeah.
Now, when did you write that one?
That was when I was single in Miami, in Coconut Grove.
Okay.
Which would have been probably the mid-'70s.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Swimming with Moonflowers. Delicate pale white moonflowers, morning glories of the night, unfurl their sheltering shrouds and bare soft hidden private souls to worship their patron goddess. as do I, standing naked in softly flowing breeze, touching me with lover's tease. Sweet pollen floats and whispers, scented songs on passion's breath. Candlelight spills out her window and joins in starlit night bliss. I plunge into waiting waters. Surprise, laughing splash welcomes me. I slide through caressing fluids, anointment in sacred wine. Body undulance, rhythmic dance, excels, strokes, kick glides, lifts my eyes. Hears soft, gurgling, slicing murmurs. I have become lost in a world of pollened air, moon, and flowers, candlelight and sultry water, until there is no more of me except the state of ecstasy. Wow, that's pretty deep. That's pretty deep. Sometimes when I read other people's poems, it's hard to figure out where they were at the moment, you know?
I was very much in a sensual place at that time. This was in a pool that's enclaved, you know, where the neighbors can't see.
Ah, okay.
And so that's as accurate a description that I could make about what really was going on.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, sounds good. And, you know, your poems have so much in them, and I found myself really being able to get to know more about you. Mm-hmm. And here's one, I'm not sure where you wrote this one, Holding Hands on the Boundary?
Yeah, now that one is fiction.
Fiction, okay.
Yeah.
Two old people side by side,
right,
under moon-glow twilight sky. Wispy clouds float ghostly by, veils the pale princess of night. Bayon waters ripple moonlight, past the old pair it barely slides. Hummock trees cast purple shadows on gentle shining waterscape. They make fluid, nuanced textures of darkness and iridescence. The old couple holds wrinkled hands on an aged oak stump near the edge of a sheltered, languished alcove. A weathered rowboat patiently waits, its frayed mooring rope unneeded in the lazy, dreamy lagoon. Their hearts quicken to the echo of fishes splashing as they breach, primal amniotic fluid for a moment in open air. They draw ever closer together. These two will breach this dense lower world. As the moonscape evening lingers, a mourning dove croons its soothing song. Bullfrog bellows for life-giving love. A chorus of calming, cheeping souls lays a blanket of life over those who will grow slowly cold. The shoreline shadows reach far out, blurring borders of sky and marsh. But in this moment of one blessed night, the old ones do not know or care of the poison snake that slithers or the mosquito that seeks prey. Decay's reek is the smell of life, and margins between are unclear. Now I'm trying to figure out what you were thinking about at that time.
Well, two things.
Uh-huh.
One is just a sensory experience. I spent times in lagoons, you know,
Right.
in small boats that you can get in narrow places and stuff like that.
Right.
And I've seen sunsets there, and I've seen evening there. And so that part is just a description of a composite of wonderful experiences that I had.
Right.
But then the old couple, that's kind of a romantic story in that mortality is always there.
Yes, yes.
And people grow old together.
Mm-hmm.
And if the love is deep enough and strong enough, sometimes you forget all about those mortalities, even as you know that you're going there yourself.
Right, right.
But sometimes you're in a place where, as a couple, you can just accept that and be attuned basically to the beauty.
Yeah, that's very beautiful, because you know, I live in an area where there are a few couples that have been together for 50, 60 years, and it's just so wonderful to see them and how they still continue to care about each other and share things together. It's pretty awesome, you know. But that was written so well, and I just really could connect with that, you know.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I love that one. And let's see.
Of course, that would be in either the winter section or
yes.
even the beyond section.
Well, this was the winter section. Also, right next to it is Sleighs and Snowy Hills.
Oh, okay.
And I remember as a kid loving to go sledding and building snowmen and having snowball fights. I grew up in Connecticut, you know.
Well, this poem is about an old man looking back at his summer and springtime.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, that's great. Sleighs and Snowy Hills. There were always a snowy hill to climb. Wood and iron belly whopper sled dragged behind. Young, tender, chafed feet that didn't mind and would last a day of wintry white into a winter's frigid night. Up the slippery slope we'd go to slide on slick steel blades toward a flat landing far below, over and over swift, smooth glides. Steel rudders made ways for sails. Rain doesn't freeze in Miami sun. No longer icy cant banks to ply. Downwind breezes became my slides. Oars and tacks my uphill tracks. Blistered palms my chafed cold heels. I returned to home of sometime snows, and in my late 50 years, some lonely streets held pristine winter falls in ways my childhood held dear. But I was the only one who seemed to climb with my ancient wooden sled behind. 3 ascents were all my body could abide. That's 3 ascents, I think that's it. Now snowy slopes are but a memory. White flake falls are followed by plows with scraping and chemical salts. And I wonder, would I still walk those steeps to sail down the bumpy silky white, or just sit and hear echoes of child laughter that on such days haunt my longing mind? Yeah, I think about that, you know, when I was a kid and we'd go outside and you'd play out there and you never got cold until you went inside and then you realized how cold you were.
And wet.
Yeah, and wet, yes, yeah. Yes. I think we have about 5 more minutes, so I'm just wondering if maybe there's a poem in Beyond that maybe you would like to share?
Yeah, you'll have to tell me what they are.
Okay, Alzheimer's, Where Have You Gone? Lost Lake.
Where Have You Gone?
Where Have You Gone? Is that a good one?
It's a good one. It's
okay.
It's not a very happy one.
Okay. Well, it's okay. Where have you gone? Oh, dear legs, where has your strength gone? Oh, I can identify. Remember when you carried me on fleet Hermian wings through gentle grassy meadows and rock-strewn mountain slopes? Oh, knees that knew no pain and hips of wild gyrations like me, have you been forsaken? Dear back, you bore the world with subtle grace, carried my powerful shoulders, which reached skyward, staunch and triumphant. Eyes, you once perked murky fogs of mystery with eagle vision in my mind, which gave its fruits without hoarding or hesitation. Have these qualities forsaken you, as they have deserted me? But take heart, our heart, beyond heart's beats true, though we struggle through a dark, narrowing tunnel, which cramps us into a humble, painful bow. Though we slide into depths that brings us to our belly, our daunted spirit yet lives. Though the leaves and fruits of life be blown away, our roots grow ever more deeply into the earth of our creation. And though the winter of this year chills and stiffens, spring will undeniably come anew. And though we are old, we will be young again. I like that. That's a nice one, because I like to feel that even though I'm older, I'm still young. And there are times when you are reminded, but most of the time I'd like to remember that I'm still young. Well, this was wonderful, and I don't know how much time we have left, but we have 2 minutes. And I'm just wondering if there's something you would like to share before we end.
Something I would like to share.
Yes.
I guess the whole theme of this poem,
Right.
It goes through the joys and the sorrows and the aches and the pains, but then it ends with a question of faith or
Right.
belief.
Right.
And these poems are all hopeful in that way.
Yes.
But they don't deny the trials that we go through in getting from there to here.
Absolutely.
You know, life isn't for sissies.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, your book really gives us some lessons in different seasons that we have to deal with, and I really enjoyed reading your poems, and I'm happy that I'm going to have a chance to read them again, because often when I read them the second time I get a new meaning from them, and I hope that I did your poetry justice.
Oh, very well. They're very nice.
Well, because I love reading poetry, but I don't always know if I'm doing it well.
It's, you know, the reading is an interpretation too. So
yes, that's true.
sometimes you hear someone else read your stuff and you say, I didn't know I meant that.
Right, right, yeah. Well, I really enjoyed having you on my show, and we might have to do this again.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yes, that would be great. That's great. It's been such a great pleasure to have you, and poetry is something that I love, and so having you on my show has been a gift.
Well, it's a gift being here.
All right.
Thank you.
Excellent.